about navigation by Aboriginal people is very limited. A lot of the early ethnographers said they didn't use the stars for navigation. We know the Torres Strait Islanders did, the seafaring Melanesian, Polynesian people certainly did, but there wasn't a whole lot of evidence for Aboriginal use of it. But we have found some stuff in recent years. In some areas, there would be navigation based more on waypoints, not as in following a star and where that star takes you where you're going, but there would be these sky maps, the star maps, where the positions of stars in the sky would sort of mimic the positions of points in the landscape that you would need to follow to get from point A to point B, usually for a robbery or a ceremony.
I think it's a brand new subject. It's never been discussed as far as we know. As it's an oral culture, they don't really have maps that they can use, and the question is how do you tell a young person or a woman how they can travel out of their own country, which they probably know reasonably well. I sit down with people and they use a pattern of stars in the sky as a memory aid to teach somebody how to get to another point. And each of these stars is a waypoint and has some description with it as well. So they look up and they look at a pattern of stars and say, well, that's where we are here. The next place you go up this river to this point, which is maybe a junction of two rivers, and that's the next star in the sky there, and on until you get to the destination. There's no suggestion that they use it for actually navigating them, because by the time they actually travel in the summertime, those stars may already be no longer visible, but it's mainly just for teaching. And one of the things that he was talking to me about was Walleye, and to a certain degree the Kamilaroi as well, though I don't have 100% collaboration or corroboration on that, have used patterns of stars in the sky to teach people how to travel.
Helps us to understand how we as humans develop knowledge systems, how we apply it, and we can go back and use navigational techniques we know now to, way back in the distant past to figure out when those traditions would have changed, how far could you get using traditional practices, navigation. So there have been people who've navigated from Tahiti to Hawaii and Rapa Nui into New Zealand just using Polynesian techniques to show that it's still entirely possible, and this is how they did it. There's also just the long-standing sort of misinterpretation of Aboriginal people were primitive or intellectually inferior, which isn't right at all, but when you have 200 and some odd years of that, people just dismiss things. Oh, they navigated, but they probably didn't know much. Well, that's not necessarily true. So a lot of the stuff wasn't recorded, and some stuff that was recorded in some ways was suppressed because part of the colonization process was to show that the people were less intelligent or maybe even less human than the white colonizers. So that sort of stuff was deliberately dismissed or put down.
I think it really boils down to the general subject of Aboriginal cultural knowledge, and that of course ties in with cultural pride. It also ties in with non-Aboriginal understanding of Aboriginal culture. I mean, I do a bit of outreach, and one of the interesting things that I've noticed since I've been working in this field is that people seem to be hungry in Australia for good news stories about Aboriginal people. And I think it's probably all part of the reconciliation that's been going on, that people are tired of hearing bad news stories. and they want to hear about the culture and interesting things that Aboriginal people understood, and they even like to hear, the Aboriginal people had a really strong culture, because I think it gives them a good feeling about the fact that they've got some connection with Aboriginal people through being in Australia.